Welcome to Sober Sunrise, a podcast bringing you AA speaker meetings with stories of experience, strength, and hope from around the world. We bring you several new speakers weekly, so be sure to subscribe. We hope to always remain an ad-free podcast, so if you'd like to help us remain self-supporting, please visit our website at sober-sunrise.com. Whether you join us in the morning or at night, there's nothing better than a sober sunrise. We hope that you enjoy today's speaker.
I'm an alcoholic. My name's Mike. Hi. Grateful to be sober. Welcome you guys who are relatively new. Yeah, it's not my favorite thing either, Steve. So you're not alone. Because I always feel self-conscious. See, what I really want is I want everybody to like me, you know, and I know it's not going to happen. It's just not the way it is in Alcoholics Anonymous. Because I'm going to carry my experience, and some of you it's not going to jive with, and to some of you it's going to sound like I'm telling you what to do. And if it sounds like that, then that's what it is, you know. But, I was separated from alcohol August 17th, 1989, and for that I'm grateful. And I was talking before the meeting with Greg there, and in early sobriety, I went to meetings all the time. I went to meetings like 3-4 times a day. I got sober up in El Toro area. It used to be called El Toro. They call it Lake Forest now because they're sort of hoity-toity. They changed the name. But it was El Toro. And I got sober at this little clubhouse, and I was going basically there, but a bunch of other meetings. I'd go to the 6 a.m. because I couldn't sleep anyways, so I couldn't wait to get to a 6 a.m. Not that I really because here's the deal. I'd go to that 6 a.m. meeting, and everybody, you guys were so happy, and, oh, Mike, they want to hug me and have a cup of coffee, and I just get away from me, I was not a people person, especially not at 6 a.m. And then I'd usually hang out for the 7:30 if I could, if I wasn't working that day or wasn't working until later, and try to get back to the noon, 5:30 every day, and then usually a later meeting because I had nothing going on in my life, I wouldn't have said that at the time, but that's the truth, and it was good. It was good for a period of time, I was separated from alcohol, I was going to meetings, and I kept hearing this message, keep coming back, it gets better. Keep coming back, it gets better. And the only problem was for me, it wasn't getting any better, This didn't change much, And I'd come to meetings and I heard all the slogans, look for the similarities, don't look for the differences, look for the similarities. But that's not how my mind worked. I grew up looking for the differences. In my family, the way I grew up was I just wanted to be separate. I wanted to be different. I wanted to be special, and I didn't feel special, up until probably 5 years of sobriety, I had this idea that I was like the black sheep of the family, and that most of the family really didn't like me that much, and my brother and my sister were my mom's favorites, until I did like my third inventory, and and really looked at the truth, and the truth was she spent a lot more time with me because I was always in trouble, so whether I was the favorite or not, she spent a lot of time with me and spent a lot of time with my stuff, and I don't know, growing up, my thinking was just so wrong, and I can see that today, but when I was growing up, that was my thinking, By the time I got to high school, all I wanted to do was stay wasted. That's all I cared about, staying wasted, and it didn't really matter what I had to do it, I was pretty, some people like to call it functional. The book calls an actor, I was a good actor, and I knew what to say and who to talk to, and I always tried to have some kind of job that would justify my drinking, and so by the time I got to Alcoholics Anonymous for the second time, it wasn't the first time, I was pretty well spent, but I wouldn't have told you that. I didn't tell you what I really felt like, because how I grew up is we don't talk about that kind of stuff. You don't share that stuff with the neighbors. You don't talk about any of your fears. You're a man, just buck up. And you don't share any of those character defects or the dark hidden secrets with anybody, because what happens is if somebody finds out, they're going to use it against you. And And so for a period of time in Alcoholics Anonymous, I wasn't sharing none of that stuff. What I would do is I would share, at least once a day, I would share some drama that was going on in my life. I was getting that second divorce that was taking forever, and living with my first ex-wife, and trying to force that relationship to work, and she wasn't treating me right, and my boss wouldn't give me a raise because he told me flat out. I mean, he was honest as can be. It was a job that was given to me in sobriety, and he told me, he goes, you're not going to be here long. These other guys that I'm giving raises to, they're going to be with me forever because they have nowhere else to go. They're either going to work in a restaurant or they're going to work this little construction deal that I got going, and you're going to be gone. And the truth was, I was, within a couple months. But at the time, that was like a big drama, and I would share whatever drama was going on in my life, and a little tear would come out, and because I wanted you to feel for me, but I wouldn't share the heartfelt stuff, In fact, I didn't even want to look at that. And so what happened was, after a period of time in sobriety, I was about 4 months sober. Like I said, going to 3 to 4 meetings. I really thought I was doing the whole deal. I had a book, and I had a sponsor. And my sponsor's basic message was take your time, and I know that's some sponsors' messages, and I'm not knocking you if that's your message. Well, maybe I am, but for me, it was a message of death, because I was getting sicker. The longer I was sober, the sicker I was getting, and because once again, I was looking at the differences. You guys seemed happy, and I wasn't happy, I just wasn't a happy camper. I'd come to meetings and I'd see people and they were laughing and they were going to the movies afterwards, and it just appeared like everybody was getting sober, more than physically sober. They were getting emotionally sober and they were having a good time, and it wasn't happening in my life, And what happened is I hit a bottom in sobriety. It was a Wednesday, a noon meeting, and I remember going to that meeting. I sat in my customary place right under the clock, I was like a fixture at this club. Everybody knew me, That's a dangerous time when everybody knows you and they know your name. But I was sitting under that clock and I couldn't stop crying, and I was just weeping, And I'm 6'3". I'm a macho man. I don't cry, not like that. That's ridiculous. And I couldn't stop. And I wasn't sharing. I was just, the whole meeting's going on, and I'm just weeping during this whole meeting because I knew it was done. Life was never going to get any better. My life sucked, and it was not getting better, and sobriety was not working. You guys were lying to me, and I wasn't drinking, and it was tough not drinking, And I heard this guy share. He was sitting right across from me, and I might have seen him before, I don't know, but I heard him loud and clear, and he had a message that it just hit me right in the heart, and it wasn't anything that I might have heard it before. I might have been in a meeting, somebody else shared it before, but it didn't hit me until then. And the message was I could get better. He shared what it was like for him, what happened, which is probably the most important part, and what it was like today. And the truth is, his life was no great shakes. He had 3 years of sobriety. He had some crummy car. He had some ugly girlfriend. He had some crummy job. But he was sober 3 years. And he was comfortable. And I was not comfortable, and so after the meeting, my face is still all wet and everything, and everybody's coming out and looking at me and asking for his phone number. I didn't want to ask him to be my sponsor because he might say no, so I still had too much ego for that. So I asked him for his number, and I couldn't wait. I waited about 10 minutes till he got home and rushed home and called him up and asked him to be my sponsor, and that guy, more than likely, that guy saved my life. Because I needed exactly what he gave me. He gave me explicit direction on what I needed to do. I would call him every day, every day. He wanted me to do, just a few things. And most of them I was doing. He wanted me to go to a meeting every day. He wanted me to pray every day. He wanted me to read the big book. He wanted me to call him and call another alcoholic, which is probably the hardest thing for me to do, because I was not into calling other people, because I had nothing to say. I was, like I said, I wasn't a people person. I chose this other buddy of mine that got sober within 2 weeks of me. I think he got sober before me 2 weeks, and so I'd call him. I go, Mark, how you doing? He goes, good. I go, you going to the meeting? He goes, yep. I go, see you there. And that was it, and that was the start, and the sponsor wanted me to work on the steps. He asked me what step I was on, and he didn't give me formal direction the way I would work with somebody today. but it was enough. It was enough. And every day I would call him, and what I wanted to do was talk about her. I wanted a sponsor like I thought my other friends had, and maybe they did. I wanted a sponsor who was like the dad that I never had, that would listen to me, that would pat me on the back and tell me how wonderful I was, and take my side, and tell me what a good guy I was, and you're doing good, Mike, and I never heard that. I'd start talking about her, and he'd go, well, did you do this? Did you do that? Yep. What step are you on? And I'd think, you're my sponsor. You know what step I'm on. Every day you ask me this. And he'd go, okay, see you later, click. And that was it, And I think, this sucks, It just didn't appear like I had the relationship that I wanted. But the truth is, that's exactly what I needed, I needed somebody that was no BS. I needed somebody that was, that would they just didn't candy coat it for me, He told me if I wanted to get better, I was going to have to work the steps, and that's what I needed to hear, because the truth is, where we got sober, probably within a 6-month period, there was a few hundred people that came through that club, and some of them maybe some of them are still sober that I don't know of, but I know of myself, my wife, and maybe like 3 other people that are still sober, and it hasn't been that long. 15 years, that's really not a long period of time. It is and it isn't, but I look at the recovery rate in the early days of Alcoholics Anonymous, and I don't have to guess, and I don't have to take anybody's word for it. They wrote it all down for us in these history books. AA Comes of Age, I think I saw over there, and Dr. Bob and the Good Old Timers, and Bill W. passed it on. They wrote all this stuff down for us and let us know exactly what it used to be like and what they had to do. The book tells me specifically why they wrote the book, to tell me exactly how to recover from alcoholism. And I thank God that I got a hold of that sponsor, because what happened is I got better, slowly, and I met my wife here. I had 6 months of sobriety, right about 6 months of sobriety, and going to all those meetings, probably, like I was telling Greg, probably hiding out in AA, but I didn't know any better, and I didn't have nothing else going on. So I'm going to all these meetings, and I'm not looking for anybody, but it just happened, and so I never tell anybody, that don't date a newcomer or don't get in a relationship for the first year, because I didn't do it. So I wouldn't like give anybody direction to do anything I didn't do. But it took a lot of work. We met and within a short period of time. Here's the truth. We met. We went on a date. And I asked her to go to a meeting. That was our first date, And it was this little meeting out in Coto de Caza, and I, because in my mind I figured, if she said yes that she'd go, maybe she just wanted to go to the meeting, and if she said no, maybe she just didn't want to go to the meeting. So I was safe, emotionally, I was safe either way, and she said yes, and we went to this meeting, and I took her out afterwards to this high-class place, you guys know it, Carl's Jr., and spent 45 cents on a cup of coffee for her, and I told her my whole life story, pretty much, all the dirty stuff, not everything, but and I don't know what I was trying to do, because, that was ridiculous, here's a beautiful woman, and I'm telling her all this stuff to push her away, and I told her Alcoholics Anonymous was my life, and if you want to see me, you're going to have to go to a lot of meetings. And she kept coming around, and we've been married for a long time now, and it's a pretty good life. It's a pretty good life, but it took a lot of work, I go to a lot of meetings still. I probably go to 10 meetings a week, which to some's a lot, to some it's not. But for me, it's what's working, and I work with a lot of new guys, and I see in their eyes the pain that I used to see in the mirror, and I never want to feel like that again. And the truth is, I haven't had to, but I've had to go through a lot of tough times. When I was about 4 years sober, about 4.5 years sober, I hit another bottom. And I'm sure it's never going to happen to you. This is what happened to me, though. I was going to meetings. I was probably going to 20 meetings a week at that time. I was at service all over the place. I sponsored a bunch of guys. I was, Orange County Service Board. I was H&I. I was Mr. AA. I've been chairman of the club a couple times by then, and all of a sudden I'm sitting in meetings, And, the book talks about restless, irritable, and discontent. And that's really what was happening, I'm tired of the newcomers getting all the attention. Newcomers get all the attention. People go up and hug them, and they get all the attention. And I'm tired of hearing them talk. And I'm tired of hearing all the knuckleheads talk that I've known for years. I've heard their story. I'm sick of it, And I'm tired of hearing myself, But by then, my ego's wrapped up in sobriety, and what am I going to do, So I figured I'm just going to keep going to meetings. I really don't have a choice, I got a sponsor that's a good sponsor, and the truth is, it had been a number of years since I'd done any real step work. I was trying to carry a message that really I didn't have in my life anymore. Dr. Tebow wrote about it years ago that our ego rebuilds itself, and that's exactly what had happened. I was living on this idea that what I did in the past was good enough to keep me sober. That what, in my mind, and it didn't sound like this, but in retrospect I can see, it's all about Mike. Mike goes to meetings, Mike sponsors guys, Mike's a service, Mike. A bunch of BS, And, I thank God that I had a buddy come back from Texas. He had gone to this conference, and these other AA knuckleheads put on this conference, and he gave me this set of tapes, and I listened to these tapes, and I was just like in the right place at the right time. I start going down the road, and I start crying. I hear these guys carrying this message to me through the tape, and they talked about this concept of relief versus freedom. That most of us, them included, they'd hit those bottoms. Most of us settle for relief. We get here, we do a few things, we get some relief. It feels better. We're not drinking now. If I see a cop in the rearview mirror, so what? I got insurance now. The wife, she let me back in the big bed. I got the job now. Stuff's doing okay, and but that's a far cry from the freedom that's really offered here, and that in their opinion, and what seems to be true, what the book talks about, that it's only through this continuous surrender, it's only through working the steps over and over again that I get to the place where I'm really connected with this higher power that solves my problems, and that I can feel comfortable, and so I got to the place where I was willing to do the deal again. And the truth is, I was surrounded by people who were telling me, you don't need to do that. You're a service. You've done the steps before. You got a sponsor. You sponsor guys. You don't need to do that. You certainly don't need to write another 4-step. In fact, there was an old timer who's gone now, and I still love him to death, and I loved him then. And his message was, if he had to do another 4-step, it would probably kill him. And maybe it would have. I don't know. I know for me, I had to do another 4-step. I had to do another 5th step. I had to do the whole process again, and see some truths that I didn't want to see. Some stuff that I'd still buried even the first time doing the steps. And get to the place that I really sought out this power greater than myself. The conception that I have today is different than it was back then, but it doesn't really matter. The book talks about that God doesn't make too hard of terms with those who earnestly seek, and so that's what I did. I started doing. For me, was opening my mind a little bit, and asking this higher power to come into my life, and looking at my stuff and doing the steps again, and things got better slowly. It's always slowly, it's never fast. See, alcohol does everything for me. At a certain time, it did everything for me that AA does today. Like, God, I take a drink, and that restless, irritable, discontent feeling goes away. Problem is, I don't stop at one drink. I just drink and drink and drink and create wreckage. Then I come to and have this wreckage, and I need to try to make amends for. Well, it's not really amends; it's apologies. And then I go on another bender, and it goes over and over. The doctor's opinion talks about that, and that was my life before. But today, I do these certain actions, and it takes longer to get to that place of ease and comfort, but it lasts. And I don't have any wreckage where I have to make amends for. My life's been continual. Maybe I've been blessed. I don't know. I know. I got friends that just don't have to do this. What I do, they just don't. And they appear to be comfortable. And they're going to meetings, 1 or 2 meetings a week. I got a good friend of mine that goes to 1 meeting a week, and he's worked the steps a couple times, but he goes to 1 meeting a week. He sponsors 1 guy, and he seems to be fine. I know for me, I just couldn't do that. I had to. it's just like my life before AA. I had to do this thing full on, and I've been placed in positions over and over. My ego's placed me, in positions over and over again where I had to surrender. We talk about self-imposed crises here in this book, and as I look back, I never think it's a self-imposed crisis until I get on the other side. I always think it's you guys. She did something, they did something, somebody said something. It's always you. It's never me, till I get on the other side and I see it was me all along. And so I've been placed in these positions where I just had to surrender. We were married for a few years, and we had a couple kids, and once again, I thought I was doing everything, and it's not that I've been blindsided by stuff. That's what I thought at the time, that I'm blindsided with stuff. But some stuff came up in our marriage. I thought everything was great. If you would have asked me, I said, it's fine. Our relationship's fine. There's nothing wrong here. I'm going to 15 to 20 meetings a week. She's going to a couple meetings a week, and raising the kids. And by that time, I had got a real job, which I didn't have for a number of years. And some issues came up in our relationship that I was forced to look at, and I didn't want to look at that, And she's telling me stuff like, all her girlfriends, and this is the best thing. I forget the verbiage they were using. This is going to be the best thing for you. Your relationship's going to be stronger. It didn't feel like it at the time. What it felt like is we were going to split up. That's what it felt like. And once again, if I would have listened to most of the people in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous, we probably would have split up, because there was people surrounding me telling me she's wrong and blah-de, and you deserve better, and look at everything you do, and all that. And I know, because she told me she was surrounded by people telling her exactly the same thing. You're right, he's wrong, all this, but we didn't, and once again, I had to hit the place of surrender where I was willing to look at my part. And everything that we've been through, I can honestly say everything we've been through has been a blessing. And we've been through numerous things. My daughter is 23 now, and from my first marriage. And when we first got together, and then we got married, I had this sponsor, the late Tex Hall, a great man, who continued to tell me, Mike, this daughter is going to want to come live with you. And I thought, oh man, you're crazy. I wouldn't tell him that, but that's what I thought. You're crazy. She's living with her mom. Her mom lets her do whatever she wants to do. We don't have any money or anything. What does she want to come live with us for? But he told me that if you continue to put these principles in your life, you continue to be consistent in your life, that's going to be attractive to her. And it was, and a few years later, she came and asked to live with us, and that was a struggle for both of us, and I know it was a struggle on the relationship with his daughter, who continued to try to get us to choose sides and try to separate us, and I was talking with one of my relatives that's actually here tonight, and we were talking about life, and I said, life's always tough, Sobriety's been tough, sobriety's been real tough, but it's been real good too. It's been real good. We got two boys, 13 and 11, that have never seen either one of us drink, and instead of this black sheep that I used to think I was, my mom, one of the reasons I moved back to San Diego was because my mom's down here, and I'm able to be there for her and to listen to and to do things with her. She went with us last year on vacation, and she's going with us again in about 3 weeks or 4 weeks up to Canada on vacation. And sobriety has given me this. I was not the kind of guy. In fact, in my world, I was going to get married again. I mean, there's no doubt, because that's the way I always was. I was get married, but I was never going to own a home because I didn't want the responsibility. I was never going to, pay my taxes when they were supposed to be paid or anything. I mean, I was always living on the edge, and even in early sobriety, I just wanted nothing to do with being a regular Joe. But when I was about 2 years sober, you're sober. I don't know. I was sober a little while. We had already been together, but I don't think we were married yet. I actually voted for the first time. See, that might not be a big thing to you, but to me that was a big thing. In fact, I gave the gal my voter, the ballot and everything, and I'm crying, and she wanted to know what was wrong, and she just didn't understand, I'd never been a part of society before. I didn't want to be a part of society. I mean, I'd been, I had regular jobs and stuff, but in my mind, I was not a part of you guys. I was different. I was separate, and I never wanted to be a part of you. And Alcoholics Anonymous has given me the opportunity to become a part of rather than apart from. If you're new or relatively new, and see, I could tell you all about all these drunkalogs and all these things from early on, from the age of 3 when I climbed up the kitchen counter and got the big thing of cough syrup that had alcohol and codeine and chugged half of it and made my brother take a sip of it, and they rushed us to the hospital and got our stomachs pumped. Or the time when I was 9 years old and went down to the I don't know if it was Circle K or 7-Eleven or whatever it was, and got some knucklehead that was over 21 to buy us a 6-pack of beer. It's amazing to me, man. But he did. I gave him $5. He gave me a 6-pack, and he kept the change, so he was happy, I guess. I can just go on all these drunkalog stories and tell you all this stuff, this wreckage that happened, the marriages and stuff. But if that didn't happen to you, you're not going to identify with that. Because it really doesn't matter what I did to get here. The truth is, I got here, and I didn't even want to be here. I got here, like I said, on August 17th, 89, and I came in on a fluke. I'd been to Alcoholics Anonymous before, and I was living with a relative, and there was some stuff going on in the house there. I had my first ex-wife and my daughter and myself living in this relative's house, and he was going on these benders and disappearing, and so I'm stuck there with his kids and his wife and my first ex-wife. It was just a nightmare, and I'm trying to hide my drinking. I was probably only drinking maybe a 12-pack a day, which that's nothing. 12-pack a day is nothing, but I don't know why I had to hide it, but I always, had to sneak out and put bottles in different places. But the truth is, I was getting pissed because he wasn't taking me with him on those benders, and a phone call came one morning. It was him, and he needed a ride because he couldn't drive, and his wife told me, go pick him up and don't come back, don't bring him back, and something told me when I got there, that I better call her and tell her, well, I'll take him to Alcoholics Anonymous. That's the only thing I can think of. I'll take him to Alcoholics Anonymous. Well, the truth is, I was trying to protect myself probably too, because I didn't, if he got kicked out of the house, where was I going to go? I'm living in that house too, She probably doesn't want me around. And so we went to Alcoholics Anonymous that night. And I remember that meeting. It was we lived in this private community up there, Coto de Casa, and there was a little meeting in the clubhouse there. And we went in, and it was probably about this size. There was like 15 or 20 people there. And I hadn't been around AA for 3.5 years. I'd been drinking and doing other stuff and creating more wreckage for 3.5 years. I'd gotten, married and divorced again and all this stuff, And I show up in this meeting, and you're so happy to see me, And I totally forgot what it was like, I had forgot that when AAs look at you and they ask you how you're doing, they really want to know, how you doing, And when they laugh, most of the time they're really laughing. It's not some phony, I was in sales. I was used to the phony laugh, and everything was phony to me. But here, these people were so real they almost glowed. It was like a surreal experience to me, and it was scary. It was really scary, but it was attractive too. And I knew this is probably what I should be doing. I'm missing out on something here, and so that's when I started doing, what I told you I was doing, going to all these meetings, and I've had to hit every bottom. For me, I think, my perception is, I think God puts me in that continual place. My ego grows, and then I just get sort of like slapped upside the head because I get too uppity, and I think I'm doing it myself. And that's not what we're supposed to be doing. I don't believe that's not what the book tells me. In fact, I hear a lot of stuff in meetings. Like I said, I go to a lot of meetings still, and I hear a lot of stuff that just doesn't coincide with the program that I read in the book and the program that I have to work. I was in a meeting today, and it was a step meeting, and they were talking about the 8-step. And like I said earlier, if you think I'm talking to you, maybe I am, maybe I'm not, but there was all kinds of opinions thrown out about the 8-step, and this guy I love, he's got like 33 years, he was asked to share, and it's a podium participation, and his basic message was, that his suggestion would be put yourself on the top of the list, on that 8-step, and that you need to make amends to yourself first, and you hurt yourself more than you hurt anybody else, and it just doesn't coincide with what I read in the book, It talks about Mike's problem, selfishness and self-centeredness. That we think is the root of the problem. And it says that I must be rid of this. I must, or it kills me. And it gives me specific directions on how to do this and to get rid of this selfishness for a period of time. And I think it's a selfless program. It's not a selfish program. And I just have to think of things a certain way, because I think where my passion comes from more than anything is I don't want to die drunk. I just don't. I don't want to die drunk. I don't want to put my wife through having a husband going out and drinking. I don't want my kids to see me that way. I don't want to create that wreckage. I don't want my mom crying anymore about where's Mike, and how come he hasn't called. We were talking before the meeting. There was a time when I was in the Air Force, I didn't call her for like 3 months. Now, there was nothing going on in my life. I was busy. I was drinking every day, and I'm working and I'm drinking, and I'm working and I'm drinking, and I didn't have any thought for my mother. Why would I call my? I don't need my mom anymore. I just had no thought for her. Selfish and self-centered. And so she had to call my first sergeant and see if I was okay. That conversation didn't go real well when he called me in his office, but that's just the way I was, and today it's not like that. Today I got a good life. And like I said at the beginning, I want to be liked by everybody, but I know it's not going to happen. I got a strong personality, and I've been told that, and there's certain people think I'm preaching at them, and the truth is they don't want to do the deal, or they don't have to do the deal. Not everybody in Alcoholics Anonymous is an alcoholic. There's a lot of people, there's friends of mine that do not have to do this deal. They come into the rooms, they drink the coffee, they do the fellowship, and they're just fine, At least it appears to be from the outside. I really don't know what's going on, but they appear to be just fine. And I know from my experience, I just can't do that. I have to do the whole deal. But as a result of that, my life is different than it's ever been. We have a quality of life today that I just wouldn't give up. All the stuff we've gone through, all this wreckage that we've done, even in sobriety, have been learning experiences for me. And I'm just barely learning how to be an adult. I'm 46 years old, and I'm barely learning how to be an adult. It's amazing. I got a grown child, my third marriage, and I'm finally learning how to have a relationship. My wife's my best friend. 5 years ago, I couldn't have told you that. My wife is not my best friend. Come on, guys. She would say that to me. I couldn't say that to her because it wasn't the truth. Because I didn't know how to have a relationship with a woman. A real relationship. And it appears to be attractive to other people. I think it was about 3 years ago when my first ex-wife called, and we got through a lot of wreckage together, a lot of wreckage. In fact, I was sober for some time, and she'd come over, and she broke into our house one time, and we had to call the cops and everything. There was all kinds of wreckage, and it wasn't always one side. I don't want to make it appear like it was all her, because it wasn't. In fact, when I got sober the first time I made those amends, I had made that list. I'd done my 8-step. My sponsor told me what to do, and then I thought I'd just kick back for a while because I'd done a lot of work. I didn't really have to go make the amends or anything. And about the third time he asked me, like 2 weeks after I did the list, about the third time he asked me if I made any of those amends, I go, nope. I'm still thinking. I'm praying on it. I'm praying for the willingness. And he said, well, who's at the top of the list? And I said, the first ex-wife. He goes, okay, I want you to go over there today and make amends. And it's like, and I did. I was the kind of guy. I just did what my sponsor told me to do. I didn't like it. I didn't want to do it, but I did it because I didn't want to die drunk. And even early on, I didn't really believe that it was going to work for me, but I saw it working for him. And then after a period of time, I saw it working for me, so I just continued to do it. But the first amends I made was to her, and I would have told you it was an amends. I went over and I knocked on the door, and she was living in this apartment, probably half a mile away or something from where we live. And probably 2 days before I cussed her out on the phone. We'd had this screaming match. But here I am knocking on the door, and she opened the door and said, "What do you want?" And I have no idea what I was saying. I really don't. Who knows what I was saying? In my mind, I was making some kind of amends, though. And she looked at me, and she got this look on her face, and she goes, "This is one of those effing steps, isn't it?" And I go, "Yep." She slammed the door, and because she knew about the program, And in my mind, that was the amends. That was the 9-step amends to her, and the relationship didn't change. There was a lot of yelling and screaming, and over the years, I tried to attempted to make amends numerous times, but I don't think my heart was really in it. I hadn't really surrendered. I hadn't really seen fully my part. And in my mind, it was just, she had done all this other stuff. So even though I'm attempting to make some amends, she really owes me, some amends too. And about three years ago, she called us up, and she had, she had some sound in her voice, and she said she needed help. And what we were doing over this period of years was attractive to her. We were living this program, and she said she needed help, and she had a problem with alcohol and drugs, and what would we suggest to do? And she had an option to go into this treatment center at the Navy was putting on. We had both spent some time in the service, so she had that option to do that. And I said, "It sounds like a good idea. It sounds like a good idea. I think you should probably do that. And we'll do whatever we can. You'd let me know if there's anything we need to do." And so for the whole time she was in that treatment place up there, we'd go up there every Wednesday night, and sometimes Kate went with me, and sometimes I went with a buddy of mine, and we'd go up there on Wednesday night where they had an open AA meeting, and to be supportive for her, and when she got out of there, she went to a sober living, and I'd go and pick her up just about every Sunday and take her to church with us, and we'd go out to eat, and I paid the bill afterwards, and we'd listen to her stuff, and I think she was sober about, somewhere between 6 and 9 months. She was in this recovery home, and I picked her up to take her to this church we were going to, and she said, "I see you carrying that book." And I was reading that book last week, and I think there might be some things you need to say to me in there, And I knew what she was talking about. She was talking about she wanted me to make amends to her, And my ego went right up, I didn't say anything at the time. My ego went right up, and it's like, I've already made amends to you. I've already tried over the years. In fact, before she got sober, about 2 years before she got sober, I remember my daughter was with us, and she was 15, and we had told her that she needed to get her homework done, and instead she went to a friend's house because they were going to go to the movies. And so I went over to the friend's house to pick her up because I had found out that that's what she did. She, not ran away, but she went over to her friend's house because she decided it was more important to go to the movies. And she had called her mom because she knew I was coming over there. And so her mom meets me in the parking lot. She was this complex. Neither one of us even lived in. She's like screaming at the top of her lungs, "You this, you that. You've ruined my life for 18 years. Bloody, bloody, bloody." And so in my mind right away, it's like, well, I'm making amends to you, but I heard what she said, I heard what she said, and I took that under consideration. I talked to my sponsor about it. I talked to my wife about it. I talked to a lot of people about it, and once again, probably half the people in the room's Alcoholics Anonymous reinforced what my ego told me. You don't owe her any amends. You took care of the daughter, and you did all this, and you, and my sponsor said something. He said, "Well, I can't tell you what to do or what not to do. What do you think you need to do? It's probably between you and God, And I prayed on it, and the truth was I never really made amends. I had made these attempts. I made these half-hearted attempts, and so I went and picked her up the next week and decided I was going to make amends to her. And before, I'd never been alone in the car with her, because my wife and we just don't do that. get in the car with another woman or anything. So I always had my son with me, or all of us sometimes stuck in the car, But this time I went and picked her up alone, and as we were going to church, I made amends to her, and what I did was pretty much right out of the book, and I didn't want to do it, but I knew it was the right thing to do. I brought up everything that I remembered. These are the things that I did wrong. And then I asked her when I got done, I said, is there anything else you need to tell me? Is there any other way that I've hurt you that you need to tell me? Is there anything else that you need to ask me or tell me to where we can amend this? And it just totally blew me away, because my thought, here's what she's going to want. She's going to want money. It's an ex-wife. She's going to want money, of course, and she's going to want stuff probably, and she's going to, I had all these fears, and she wanted none of that. And in fact, all the stuff that I'd brought up, she told me that most of that stuff, she knew that's the way I was, and that's not what bothered her. She goes, but these things that you said, and the things that your mom had said to me, and do you still think I'm a bad mother? And stuff that to me was just inconsequential stuff. That's what had hurt her. And what she wanted, all she wanted me to do was treat her with respect. That's all she wanted to do. And that started a whole new shift in our relationship. It's not like we're best friends, but we actually talk on the phone. And for a period of time, she would call and she would talk to me about stuff, and what I got out of that more than anything is I've heard for years in the program that the amends are for me. I make the amends so I feel better, and my perception on that is maybe some, but I think I need to make the amends, because if I don't make the amends, the other person can't get better. The other person's holding on to resentments, just like the alcoholic. She's holding on to these resentments, and no matter what, until I made the amends, she had no opportunity to get any better, because I wasn't giving it to her, and when I made the amends to her, all of a sudden she saw that I knew my part, and that I was willing to amend my behavior, and to throw some apologies out there too that need to be thrown out there, but basically amend the behavior, and all of a sudden she could forgive me, and it's an amazing thing. But it's only because I did it pretty much exactly like what this book talks about, I work with a lot of guys, and just my experience, the only ones that really get better are the ones that are willing to do the deal, half measures avails us nothing. There's a line in the book that talks about, if you're seriously alcoholic as we were, we believe there's no middle of the road solution. See, I really want middle of the road solution. That's what I really crave, because I'm lazy. I want things given to me. I don't want to work for anything. I just want to feel good all the time, But what I found is I just can't do that, In fact, I hear in meetings all the time that this is just a gift. You just come to sobriety, and sobriety is a gift to you. And that's not what Bill says in his story. In fact, Bill says a price has to be paid. It meant the destruction of self-centeredness. It means we must turn to the Father of light in all things. And that's what I found that I've had to do. I've had to do the best I can to destroy the self-centeredness that ran my life. As a result of being what most people would consider a book thumper. I've heard all this. I've heard all the things. You're a Nazi. You're this. You're that. I don't even care anymore. You call me whatever you want. All I know is, as a result of doing this, I got a good life. And I'm going to carry the truth as I know it. And if your truth's different, your truth's different. But early on, like I said, they have it all down in AA history. You don't have to believe me. You can get the books and you can read it yourself. The recovery rate was way different than what it is today. Way different, And they weren't all lower bottom drunks either. There was a lot of low bottom drunks, but they had them do specific things. In fact, in Akron, in the early 40s, before it was even really called Alcoholics Anonymous, and you can read it in Not God, which is, it's not an AA publication, but the history of Alcoholics Anonymous, by a guy named Ernest Kurtz, and it's a real good book. And it's sort of dry, but it's a good book if you like the AA history. And they used to call this the Take It or Leave It Club, because here's what would happen. Somebody would come to Alcoholics Anonymous, and the members would say, this is the way we do things. And if you tried balking, well, take it or leave it. this is the way we do things, and if you don't want to do them, that's okay, go back where you came from. And that's not politically correct today, but I've never really been politically correct anyway, so it just doesn't matter to me that much, And like I said at the beginning, I want everybody to like me, but I just know it's not going to happen, I had a sponsor, and I had a couple in a row that they cared more for me than what I thought of them. They cared more for me to carry the message to me, even though I'm way bigger than them. I was sort of this angry guy, and even though I didn't think so, they thought I was pretty angry. And, they just knew that if they didn't carry the message to me, and if I didn't do this deal, that I was not going to get any better. And in fact, there was one guy who was, he told me he wasn't even really concerned for me. He was concerned for her. He said, I don't even, you're probably going to stay sober. That's what he told me. You're going to stay sober, but if you don't get better, you're not going to have a life with her, and you're going to drag her down too. And so I do things a certain way. And the truth is, it's not that hard when I just don't think, when I just act. I get up in the morning and I have certain readings that I do, some AA-approved books, some non-AA-approved books. And I try to meditate. I try to do this quiet time that, in the early time of AA, they used to use that term quiet time a lot. And they thought that was more important than going to meetings for some reason, It's crazy, I know. But the truth is, I didn't do that for a long time in sobriety. Because I would try to meditate, and I would sit there and close my eyes, and then all these thoughts would rush into my head, like the chatter of 1,000 monkeys. And that told me, Mike, you just can't meditate. It's just not for you. Well, it's like anything else, you need to work at it. That's what I found. So that's what I do. And I'm not good at it, but I do it, and I do it on a regular basis. And then I go about my day trying to be the best member of Alcoholics Anonymous, trying to be the best husband, trying to be the best father that I could be at that day, and ask for guidance throughout the day. I go to meetings every day, and it's amazing to me when I go to meetings how easy it is to get out of myself. And that's one of the blessings of meetings. Whether I think it's a good meeting or a bad meeting, whether I think the AA message is carried or not, I'm out of myself for like an hour and a half, depending on the meeting. I'm listening to all your stuff. The only problem with the drama meetings is, if there's no real message for me, when I leave there, my stuff comes all back. As soon as I walk out that door. So I tell you, I love Alcoholics Anonymous. And I love the people that love Alcoholics Anonymous. And I can tell if you love Alcoholics Anonymous or not. You don't listen to the people that I know. What it's like today is way different than what it was like before. And some people might not think it's better. We were talking about a acquaintance of ours on the way up here, and he's got 30 years of sobriety, and I don't know if he's ever really held a real job, and I mean, he's got all this stuff going on that's totally different than what we going on, but he's sober, and he's helping other guys, and he's carrying the message, and he seems pretty content, and my opinion is that if you're content with what you're doing, if you're truly content, and not just acting, if you're truly content with what you're doing, that's what you're supposed to be doing. And today I'm pretty content with what I'm doing, And it's not that everything's perfect, because in my mind I'd have, like 5 or 6 things different, But my sponsor tells me that, God doesn't really care what I think, and if I had my way, I'd be drunk. So just keep doing what I'm doing, and so that's what I do. If you're new or relatively new, a whole new life's waiting for you. A whole new life's waiting for you, and it's just a matter of, are you willing to do it or not? Every single step along the way, your ego is going to say, I don't need to do that, or I don't need to do the whole thing. Like I said, we're talking about the 8th step today. It says that word all twice in the same step. Made a list of all persons we had harmed and became willing to make amends to them all. My experience is most people are not willing to do that, and so they don't get the benefits, because the benefits is permanent sobriety and a content, useful life. That's what Bill talks about in the 12 and 12. And since August 17th, 1989, I've had permanent sobriety. And I have a content, useful life. And you guys gave it to me. You guys showed the path for me, and all I've done is pick up the trail and just continue to walk. And if you're new or relatively new, you can do this. You can have a good life. You can be content with who you are, no matter who it is. You're enough just the way you are. You're one of God's kids. And He doesn't love me or anybody else here any more than He loves you. All you got to do is do your part. All you got to do is be willing, and it's ready for you. Thanks.
Thank you for listening to Sober Sunrise. If you enjoyed today's episode, please give it a thumbs up as it will help share the message. Until next time, have a great day.